this section be very interesting and gaining more momentum recently from the last year. Okay, let me share my slide, and I think we can have a good discussion afterward on this section. Okay, so basically this section is about Thailand carbon market, the context and the opportunities. So and I think most of you guys have developed the business model allow the carbon credit. So this section might be interesting to you all. So let me start by having this one to provide a background of economic instrument to support climate actions, right? As we may know, we have like climate mitigation and climate adaptation, and underneath that you can see that we have the mandatory measures and voluntary to promote support measures. Originally, as you guys know, in the past, actually the carbon credit come out from the market mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol, right? In order to allow different parties to develop the least cost solution and in order to trade and exchange between the system. But basically, as you know, again, that for the last 10 years, the carbon market has been like not that well compared to in 2008, 2009, at that time, the peak of the market. And the reason is because the mandatory measures is kind of, especially in Thailand, right? Because we don't have the cap and trade system, the carbon tax system. So the demand from the compliance market is nothing, it's zero basically. So the market has been driven mainly by voluntary market in Thailand. And even though we have the voluntary demand in Thailand, but as you know, there are several types of crediting mechanism available in the market, whether it's on the left-hand side, the CDM standard, the independent standard, and the national standard. So I think you guys maybe know even more than me that when you develop the crediting mechanism, you have to register at one of these mechanisms in order to get issuance and certification system to generate your carbon credit. And it also help relevant to the demand and supply of the credit that you develop in the market as well. I just have to show this slide. This is the global market, but this is the only global slide that I will have. As you can see here, I highlight the Thailand Voluntary Emission Reduction Program, which is the domestic carbon credit system in Thailand. And this slide to show you the supply side of the credit available in the market. So in the TWER program or the TWER credit, let's say, you can see we have now, I think this figure is a little bit outdated, but we have allowed 200 projects registered under the TWER program in Thailand. And the issue credit available in the market is allowed 6 million tons. So that means there already the carbon credit available in Thailand allows 6 million tons. And I will show you more like what would be the demand from those credits that we have available from 6 million tons. And just to show you again on this slide that for the carbon credit, especially in the voluntary market, sometimes the buyers can also choose not only to buy domestic credit, right? But they can also buy like, okay, gold standard credit or VCS credit, VCU credit. So that means the other type of credit, they are also your competitor if you want to raise the demand for your carbon credit. So picking the right one or developing the right mechanism is also the key to encourage or to provide financing solution to your project as well. And as I mentioned before, in the past, the carbon credit has been used as one of the offsetting mechanism in the compliant market. But as you know now, most of this kind of thing has been not used that much anymore at the moment, especially in Thailand, because we don't have the ETS system that we can offset for. So that's why Thailand, they try to develop the domestic voluntary market system in order to create the demand for the carbon market the government by TGO, they set up the program called the Thailand Carbon Offsetting Program, or TCOP, as you can see from here on the left-hand side. So basically, under this program, people or company or event can do their own carbon footprint, and then once they know how much emission they emit, right, they can voluntarily offset their emission reduction from their footprint. So this is basically the idea. But the market right now, there's no exchange. As you know, in Thailand, there's only over-the-counter market. So whereby the seller and buyer just to take the phone and call and so negotiate the contract in the, bilaterally. There's no exchange market. This slide just to show you the volume of the Thailand domestic carbon market from the last 5 years. Sorry that some of the number is in Thai. We starting from the year 2059. This is 2006, 2016 and 2017 until 19. The key point from this slide is the volume that trade in the market, as you can see here. It's kind of growing up every year, around 20 to 30% the market growth. But still, if you see the volume trade is still very marginal. Like the volume trade this year is around 2,000 tons of CO2, which means like based on, if you remember the supply side, we have around 6 million tons of available credit, but the volume has been bought only 200,000 tons. So the supply is far outreach the demand. That's why you can see the price on the figure below here that in the beginning, the price around 150 baht per ton, which is around $5. Now the average price of the credit in Thailand is less than $1 per ton of CO2. And actually, I have a chance to work with TGO 3 years ago, try to come up with a solution to boost the demand for the carbon market in Thailand, and try to analyze why the price has been so low for the last 4 or 5 years. One of the main takeaway that we learned from the market is that most of the credit available under the TWER system right now is mostly come from renewable energy and also energy efficiency credit, which means those projects most of the time in the past, they has been subsidized by the government under different programs that I mentioned before in the previous climate finance instrument, whether they get soft loan or subsidy, and then that project get built, right? And then they register under the domestic carbon market system. So that's why they can sell the cost of the carbon credit at a very cheap cost. The cost that they have is only issuance cost and verification cost, which is around 10 baht per ton. So they can still make like 50% profit based on the cost structure that they have. But I think TGO also aware of this like oversupply of the market and try to improve the quality and try to set the new standard of the TWER market in Thailand by strengthening more rigid like additionality criteria and things like that to lower the supply and on the other hand try to boost up the demand side in the market as well. Just to show you one more slide, and I will explain more about why the demand is quite low. You can see here based on the traded volume in this year, like 200,000 K, right? The amount of volume total transaction trade value is only like 4.5 million baht. So let's say less than 10 million baht a year for the whole Thai market. So which is very, very small, right? I mean, like it's like tiny bit of demand. And based on our analysis, I think one of the main issue we found that why there are not many people offsetting their credit, I mean their emission, is because first, they don't know how much they're emitting. So basically they don't have their own footprint. For example, if you ask people on the street, like, oh, how much you emit your CO2 per year, no one know. And if you ask like 100 company, maybe 99 companies say they don't know also how much emission they emit last year. So that means when they don't know what they emit, they don't need, they don't have no idea how much they should offset, right? So that's the main issue. And the carbon footprinting process takes some time and also need some technical capacity in order to develop the footprint and things like that. So that's why that's, I think, is the one of the major barrier limited demand of the carbon market in Thailand. I think, but the solution that we try to come up now is that why rather than relying on carbon footprint from the corporate or from individual activity that we have, why we don't just like increase the demand at the point of service or point of sale. For example, two ideas coming up for the last few years that we can have the point of sale at the gas station or at the electricity bill in our household, because from electricity consumption, you can convert quickly how much CO2 you emit indirect from grid emission factor, right? And also from the gasoline that you fill in the gas station, you can also convert how much would that represent for the gasoline you fill in, convert back to emission. And then you can have the option for people to offset their emission at the gas station or at the meter of electricity consumption. I think that that thing is one of the idea to boost the demand in the market, to provide more option for people to access to the carbon credit that we are working right now. But on the other hand, because as I mentioned before, because the momentum of the market, global market is moving toward the net zero, and this also give good news to the carbon market, because when people want to become or achieve net zero, obviously they cannot do it alone within that themselves. So they still have residual emission, and most of the time need carbon offsetting mechanism to help them to meet the target. And that's why the carbon market become play more important role for the last 2 to 3 years. And TGO also capture that momentum and now developing what we call Thailand Carbon Neutral Network. Basically, this is the network that try to create demand from big corporate private sector, encouraging them to become net zero or carbon neutral network. And that's why when they commit to become carbon neutral, they need demand for carbon offset in order to let them meet the target that they set for. So this scheme is under the development and public hearing by TGO right now at the moment. And they expect that this carbon network can help to boost the demand of the carbon market in Thailand, as you can see. This is the scheme working not only by TGO, but also by Federal Thai Industry Association as well. So this is the concept that they try to promote more demand by having the initiative from big corporate in Thailand, setting up their net zero emission target, and then create demand for the carbon market in the country. But let's see whether we're gonna have sufficient demand compared to the supply available in the market and upcoming supply also in the future. But under this scheme, TGO also limit the type of carbon credit that can be used and to offset under what they call carbon neutral network, which is now they limit only the T-work credit and JCM credit. That means if the private sector under this network want to achieve carbon neutral target, they can only use these two credit under this scheme to offset their emission. From VCS, VCU, or CDM is not eligible under this program. And then the benefit for Thai company who become carbon neutral is that TGO will collect the name and then send to UNFCCC to recognize them at the world level, so they can be more proud that they help the climate to become neutrality. That does make the thing more, as I mentioned before, there's two types of project, right? The GHG reduction project, which is try to offset to meet the climate neutrality. But as you know now, we are talking more about net zero, in which the compensation cannot come from the reduction project alone, but must be removed or sink from the project. So again, I just want to say something that the momentum is moving toward from reduction to removal projects. So if you are developing the carbon removal project, I think you are on the right track, because the reduction project will play less important role in my personal view for the market in Thailand also in the future. Okay, so I think this is just to give you the overview of the Thai market, that the demand is very limited. The size of the market is still very small, but there are a lot of initiative coming up now, try to promote and boost the demand. So I think you are maybe on the right track to go into this momentum in the market. So I'm stop here and open for your questions, if any question you may have for Thai market.
Thank you so much again, also kind of Boonrod, for this great input, and also for the good news again for our teams, that especially I think for 3 of you, this carbon removal projects are definitely at the kind of core. So there is an opportunity despite the constraints. So maybe in the interest of time, maybe we can keep the questions at 10 minutes. So what are like your questions, comments that you would like to share?